This is Alex Mercer, and 1 week into this war, there is a strange, unsettling realization settling over the world. A realization that reality itself no longer feels solid. 7 days ago, life moved with structure and expectation. Alarms rang in the morning, streets filled with motion and noise. People planned days, weeks, years ahead without questioning whether the future would arrive as promised. Now time feels distorted. Days blur together. Morning and night lose their meaning. People check clocks not to stay on schedule, but to reassure themselves that time is still moving forward. The world hasn't stopped turning, but it no longer feels anchored to anything familiar. There is a heaviness in the air that words struggle to describe. People walk through their days with a distant look in their eyes, as if reality is happening just slightly out of reach. Conversations trail off mid-sentence. Laughter feels out of place, almost disrespectful, yet silence feels unbearable. News updates no longer shock, they exhaust. The constant stream of information has numbed the senses, replacing panic with a dull, persistent dread. This is not the chaos of the first hours. This is something deeper. This is the moment humanity begins to understand that the war is not a temporary interruption. It is the environment now. This is Alex Mercer. And what makes this stage so unsettling is how quickly people adapt to the unthinkable. Emergency alerts that once sent hearts racing are now met with resigned glances. Sirens that once froze entire cities in place now register as background noise, unless they stop. And when they stop, the fear intensifies, because silence carries a different meaning now. Silence no longer means safety. It means uncertainty. It means waiting. It means the next sound could arrive at any moment, and no one knows what form it will take. Homes feel different. Rooms feel smaller. Windows become sources of anxiety instead of light. At night, people lie awake listening to the hum of electricity if it still exists, to distant echoes of activity, to nothing at all. Sleep comes in fragments, interrupted by sudden thoughts, imagined sounds, or the quiet realization that tomorrow may not resemble today. Dreams are restless. Waking up brings no relief, only confirmation that this new reality remains. 1 week in, the psychological shift is undeniable. Fear has evolved. It is no longer sharp and explosive. It is slow, constant, and consuming. This is Alex Mercer, and across the world, the same emotions play out in countless homes, cities, and nations. People stop asking when things will return to normal, because deep down, they already know the answer. Normal is gone. What replaces it is not yet fully defined, but it carries weight. It changes how people think, how they plan, how they connect with one another. The future no longer stretches forward. It compresses into manageable pieces. Hours, days. The present moment becomes the only place that feels real. And then there is the silence after the sirens. In the early days, the world was loud with warning. Alerts screamed from phones. Sirens cut through cities day and night. Sleep was shattered repeatedly by urgent sounds demanding attention. Fear was constant and overwhelming, but it was also clear. Loud danger felt understandable. Now, 1 week later, the sound has faded in many places, and what remains is far more unsettling. Empty skies, quiet streets, nights without alarms. The absence of noise creates a vacuum where fear grows unchecked. This is Alex Mercer, and people have learned that quiet does not mean peace. It means anticipation. It means something is being decided somewhere beyond sight and sound. People sit in darkened rooms, staring at walls, listening for anything. Engines, voices, alerts, distant rumbles that confirms the world is still moving. Every unexpected sound triggers a physical reaction. A dropped object, a door closing, thunder. The body responds before the mind can catch up. 1 week in, fear has embedded itself into muscle memory. Cities feel hollow. Streets that once echoed with traffic and conversation now feel like abandoned sets after filming ends. Lights flicker or remain off entirely. Movement is cautious. People speak quietly, even when there is no one to overhear. The silence presses down, making every decision feel heavier. Should you step outside? Should you conserve supplies? Should you reach out to someone or wait? In the absence of sirens, people must interpret the quiet themselves, and that responsibility is terrifying. This is Alex Mercer, and the silence stretches time in unnatural ways. Minutes feel longer. Nights feel endless. The mind fills the gaps with imagined outcomes, worst-case scenarios, unanswered questions. Waiting becomes its own form of suffering. Waiting for updates, waiting for reassurance, waiting for something, anything, to break the stillness. And when something finally does, whether it's news, sound, or movement, the relief is brief, because it confirms what everyone already knows: the war is still here. 1 week in, humanity is no longer reacting. It is enduring. The initial shock has faded, replaced by a quiet, heavy awareness. Life continues, but without its former confidence. People move forward not because they feel safe, but because stopping feels worse. This is the stage where the war sinks into the soul of the world, reshaping how people think, feel, and exist. Not through constant explosions or endless sirens, but through the slow realization that this reality is not temporary. This is Alex Mercer, and as the world listens to the quiet, one truth becomes clear. The most frightening part of this war is not always the noise. It's the moments when the noise disappears and everyone is left alone with their thoughts, their fears, and the understanding that the world they once knew now exists only in memory. This is Alex Mercer, and 1 week into this war, something deeply human has quietly disappeared: the ability to plan a future. Not because people no longer care about tomorrow, but because tomorrow itself feels uncertain. Just days ago, conversations were filled with long-term ideas, trips that hadn't happened yet, careers still unfolding, weddings planned months in advance, retirements imagined as distant but secure milestones. Those conversations have faded, not dramatically, not with announcements or goodbyes, but softly, as if they were never meant to survive this moment. The future has not been canceled, it has been compressed. Shrunk down to something smaller, more manageable, more fragile. Families now speak in shorter time frames. Not next year, not even next month. The questions are quieter and more urgent. Do we have enough food for the next few days? Is the power likely to stay on tonight? Should we conserve what we have, just in case? These are not questions born of panic anymore. They are born of adjustment. People are learning how to live inside uncertainty, and that learning comes at a cost. The mental space once occupied by dreams is now filled with calculations, contingencies, and quiet fear. This is Alex Mercer, and inside homes around the world, parents are performing a delicate balancing act. They move with practiced calm, their voices steady, their expressions composed. They answer questions carefully. They smile when they can. But behind that calm is a weight they cannot share, a constant awareness that they are protecting more than themselves. Fear is rationed, hidden, swallowed. Parents carry it silently so their families don't have to. And in doing so, they age in ways no mirror can reflect. Partners cling to one another more tightly now. Not out of romance, but reassurance. Presence becomes more valuable than promises. Arguments that once mattered feel trivial. Silence becomes shared instead of lonely. There is comfort in proximity, in knowing someone else is still here, still breathing in the same room. Love under pressure becomes quieter and more serious. Less about the future, more about now, more about staying. This is Alex Mercer, and hope still exists, but it has changed its shape. It no longer announces itself boldly. It whispers. It hides in small moments. A shared meal, a familiar song, a routine maintained despite everything. Hope becomes cautious, afraid of being noticed. People no longer say, everything will be okay. They say, let's get through today. And somehow, that feels honest, more achievable, more real. 1 week into this war, the future feels like a fragile object no one wants to touch too hard. Planning ahead feels dangerous, as if imagining tomorrow might somehow jinx it. So people live closer to the present than ever before. They measure time in meals, in daylight, in the quiet hours before sleep. Life becomes smaller, but also more intense. Every moment carries weight. Every decision feels important. And in this narrowed world, people learn what truly matters, often too late, always under pressure. This is Alex Mercer, and as night falls, another transformation takes place. One that reshapes the world outside as much as the one reshaping lives within. Cities, once symbols of energy and permanence, now feel like strangers after dark. Streets that once glowed with confidence are dim, fragmented by outages and intentional blackouts. Neon signs flicker or disappear entirely. Windows go dark earlier than they used to. The city exhales, but not in relief, in caution. Walking through these streets feels different now. Sounds travel farther. Footsteps echo too loudly. A distant noise can stop someone in their tracks. People walk faster, heads slightly lowered, eyes scanning without realizing they're doing it. Conversations are shorter, voices softer, laughter rarer. The city no longer feels like a shared space. It feels like a place to pass through carefully, quietly, without drawing attention. This is Alex Mercer, and curfews change the rhythm of urban life completely. Night no longer belongs to freedom, entertainment, or rest. It belongs to rules. Streets empty earlier. Public spaces lose their warmth. What once felt alive now feels paused, as if the city itself is holding its breath. Familiar routes feel unfamiliar in the dark. Landmarks lose their comfort when they're barely visible. Even places people have known their entire lives feel altered, as if something essential has been removed. Shadows stretch longer now, not just because of the lighting, but because of the fear attached to them. Every doorway looks deeper. Every alley feels more uncertain. People notice things they never noticed before. The way light pools on pavement. The way buildings loom instead of welcome. The city's personality has shifted, It no longer reassures. It watches. This is Alex Mercer. And perhaps the most unsettling part is how quickly this becomes normal. After just 1 week, people adapt to the darkness. They plan routes based on lighting. They time movements carefully. They avoid unnecessary risks. Survival instincts take over quietly, efficiently. The city becomes something to navigate rather than enjoy. Home becomes something to retreat to rather than leave. Inside apartments and houses, people draw curtains tighter. Lights stay low. Rooms feel more enclosed. The outside world presses in through windows, through silence, through the awareness that safety feels conditional. Even home, once the ultimate refuge, now feels slightly exposed. Not unsafe, but not invincible. 1 week into war, that subtle shift changes everything. This is Alex Mercer, and across the world, millions experience the same quiet realization at night. The place they live no longer feels like the place they knew. Cities haven't been destroyed everywhere, but they've been transformed psychologically. Their energy has changed. Their promise has dimmed. What remains is a version of urban life shaped by caution, restraint, and watchfulness. And yet, life continues. People adapt. They survive. They find ways to exist within this altered landscape. But something has been lost. Something intangible but deeply felt. The carefree relationship between people and their cities. The assumption of safety. The confidence that nightfall was just another part of the day. This is Alex Mercer, and 1 week into this war, the changes are no longer loud or sudden. They are quiet, persistent, emotional. Families no longer plan the future. They protect the present. Cities no longer glow with certainty. They endure the night. And as the world adjusts to this new reality, one truth becomes clear. The war has not just changed borders or governments. It has changed how people live, think, and feel. One quiet night at a time. This is Alex Mercer, and 1 week into this war, the world is experiencing a different kind of collapse. One that doesn't arrive with explosions or sirens, but with exhaustion. In the early days, people couldn't look away. Screens glowed constantly in living rooms, kitchens, bedrooms. Phones were refreshed endlessly. Every alert felt critical. Every update felt like it might explain what was happening or offer some sense of control. People stayed awake longer than they should have, convincing themselves that if they watched closely enough, they could somehow stay ahead of the fear. But the human mind has limits, and now those limits are being reached. News fatigue sets in quietly, not as indifference, but as overload. The headlines keep coming, but they begin to blur together. Different cities, different numbers, different warnings. The details change, but the meaning feels the same. People still turn the news on in the morning and leave it playing in the background all day. But their attention drifts. Eyes glaze over. The brain begins to protect itself by tuning out what it can no longer process. It's not denial. It's survival. This is Alex Mercer, and what makes this fatigue so unsettling is that fear does not fade with it. Fear does not get tired. It settles into the background of everything. It shapes decisions silently. People choose what to eat, where to go, when to sleep, and whom to call based on information they barely remember hearing. Even when the news is muted, the anxiety remains. It hums beneath conversations. It interrupts thoughts. It makes rest feel impossible. People are exhausted, yet constantly alert, caught in a state where the body wants to shut down, but the mind refuses to let go. Sleep becomes shallow and unreliable. People fall asleep with the television on, not because they're watching, but because silence feels worse. They wake up to headlines they don't remember falling asleep to. Time loses its edges. Days feel long and short at the same time. People stop reacting emotionally to individual events, not because they don't care, but because caring at full intensity every hour would break them. Compassion fatigue spreads alongside fear, and with it comes guilt. Guilt for feeling numb, for needing a break, for wanting to look away even when the world feels like it's falling apart. This is Alex Mercer, and even those who try to disconnect can't fully escape it. The war is everywhere. It's in conversations overheard in grocery stores. It's in empty shelves and altered routines. It's in the way people glance at their phones without opening them, as if bracing themselves for bad news before it even appears. People crave normalcy, yet feel uneasy when things seem too quiet. The mind is stretched between two unbearable states, knowing too much and knowing nothing at all. 1 week in, information no longer brings comfort. It brings weight. And yet, people keep watching. Not for reassurance, but because stopping feels dangerous, as if not paying attention might allow something terrible to happen unnoticed. This constant low-level vigilance becomes its own form of trauma. The world hasn't just changed physically. It has rewired how people think, how they process reality, how they cope. This is Alex Mercer. And while the public grows weary of the constant stream of updates, there is one place where exhaustion takes on a far heavier meaning. Hospitals. 1 week into the war, hospitals are no longer simply overwhelmed. They are strained to their breaking point. Medical systems that were already fragile before the conflict are now operating under relentless pressure. Supplies run low. Equipment is rationed. Power flickers. Backup systems hum constantly, reminding everyone how close failure always is. Inside these buildings, time moves differently. Days blur together for doctors and nurses who haven't had proper rest in far too long. Shifts extend beyond what is reasonable or safe. Breaks are skipped. Meals are forgotten. Faces show the quiet signs of burnout. Hollow eyes, slowed movements, brief moments of stillness before the next emergency demands attention. These professionals carry a weight that few outside the walls can truly understand. They are not just treating injuries and illness. They are absorbing grief, fear, and impossible responsibility. This is Alex Mercer, and the decisions being made inside hospitals now are ones no human should ever have to make. Choices about who receives limited resources, who can wait, who cannot. These decisions are not made lightly, and they do not fade when the shift ends. They follow people home, linger in silence, and return in dreams that offer no rest. The moral weight of survival presses down harder with each passing day. Waiting rooms no longer sound the same. There is no chatter, no casual conversation. Just quiet. A heavy, suspended silence broken occasionally by footsteps, whispered updates, or the distant sound of equipment. Families sit together, close but emotionally distant, lost in their own thoughts. Hope exists, but it is restrained, careful not to rise too high. Everyone understands that outcomes are uncertain, and certainty is a luxury no longer available. This is Alex Mercer, and even outside active conflict zones, hospitals feel the strain. Supply chains are disrupted. Medications arrive late or not at all. Specialized care becomes harder to access. Power instability adds another layer of stress. Medical staff work knowing that systems could fail at any moment, that redundancy is no longer guaranteed, and still they show up. Still they work. Still they carry on, driven by duty, compassion, and the understanding that stopping is not an option. 1 week into the war, hospitals are no longer just places of healing. They are places where humanity is tested daily, where compassion collides with limitation, where endurance replaces optimism, and where the cost of survival is paid in exhaustion and emotional scars. The people inside these walls are holding the line quietly, without recognition, without relief, without certainty. This is Alex Mercer, and as news fatigue dulls the public's emotional responses and hospitals quietly absorb the human cost, the war reveals one of its most devastating truths. It doesn't just destroy infrastructure or reshape borders. It drains people, slowly, relentlessly. It wears down attention, empathy, and strength, leaving behind a world that is tired but still afraid, exhausted but still standing. 1 week in, fear has not gone away. It has simply learned how to live alongside fatigue, and that may be one of the most dangerous stages of all. This is Alex Mercer, and 1 week into this war, something irreversible has already begun to take shape, something that will not disappear when the fighting stops. Trauma does not wait for years to pass. It does not wait for peace treaties or history books. It forms immediately, quietly, inside the human nervous system. And now, only 7 days in, the first generation of war trauma is already being born. People begin to notice it in small, unsettling ways. A sudden sound causes the heart to race. A door slams and the body reacts before the mind can catch up. Sleep no longer feels like rest. It feels like a fragile ceasefire that can be broken at any moment. Dreams grow darker, heavier, more vivid. Some wake in panic without knowing why. Others feel strangely detached from their surroundings, as if reality itself has softened at the edges. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs of a mind trying to survive something it was never designed to endure. This is Alex Mercer, and what makes this moment so profound is how widespread these effects already are. Trauma is not limited to front lines or impact zones. It spreads through screens, through voices, through shared fear. Even those far from physical danger carry the weight of constant uncertainty. The brain learns quickly. It learned that the world is unpredictable, that safety is conditional, that calm can be interrupted without warning. Once learned, these lessons are difficult to unlearn. Children are not the only ones affected, though history often focuses on them. Adults, too, are being reshaped. Emotional responses flatten. Patience thins. Empathy becomes harder to access, not because people care less, but because they are overwhelmed. The nervous system remains on high alert, scanning for threats that may or may not come. This constant vigilance is exhausting, and over time it changes how people think, feel, and connect with one another. This is Alex Mercer, and the most haunting part is that many don't even realize it's happening yet. They tell themselves they're fine, that this is temporary, that they'll process it later. But trauma doesn't wait politely in the background. It settles in quietly, embedding itself in habits, reactions, and memories. Long after the war ends, long after headlines fade, these invisible wounds will remain, carried by millions who lived through this first week and felt their sense of safety fracture. 1 week in, the war has already reached into the future. It has begun shaping the emotional landscape of a generation that will remember not just what happened, but how it felt to live through it. The fear, the waiting, the uncertainty. These memories will surface years from now in unexpected ways, triggered by sounds, situations, or moments that resemble this time. The war will end someday, but for many it will never truly be over. This is Alex Mercer, and as trauma quietly takes root within individuals, another concept begins to unravel just as quickly. Borders. On maps, lines still exist. Countries still have names. Flags still fly. But on the ground, reality no longer respects these divisions the way it once did. 1 week into the conflict, borders mean everything and nothing at all. Refugees continue moving, not because they want to, but because staying has become impossible. Some borders tighten, fortified with checkpoints and restrictions. Others bend under pressure, forced to absorb waves of people seeking safety. Some nations feel overwhelmed, struggling to respond. Others feel isolated, watching the world fracture from a distance. The political meaning of borders intensifies, even as their human meaning dissolves. This is Alex Mercer. And what becomes clear is that survival does not care about nationality. People crossing borders are not thinking about sovereignty or policy. They are thinking about food, shelter, and safety. They carry documents that may or may not matter anymore. They speak languages that may or may not be understood. What defines them now is not where they're from, but what they've lost and what they're trying to protect. Communities near borders change rapidly. Temporary camps become permanent. Transit points become settlements. Tension rises, not always from hostility, but from exhaustion and fear. Resources are limited. Trust is fragile. People from different backgrounds are brought together by circumstance, not choice. And yet, within this strain, moments of shared humanity still appear. A gesture, a shared silence, an unspoken understanding that everyone here is carrying something heavy. This is Alex Mercer, and even for those who never cross a border, the idea of national identity begins to shift. Loyalty becomes complicated when systems fail. Pride mixes with fear. Questions arise that once felt abstract, but now feel urgent. Who protects whom? Who belongs where? What happens when safety is no longer guaranteed by geography? These questions don't have simple answers, and 1 week in, they hang in the air unresolved. Borders, once symbols of order and stability, now feel fragile. They can be closed, overwhelmed, ignored, or erased by necessity, and yet they still hold power. Power to determine who moves, who waits, who is allowed safety, and who is denied it. This contradiction defines the moment. Borders are everywhere and nowhere, enforced and meaningless, essential and insufficient. This is Alex Mercer, and when you look at the world 1 week into this war, you see a planet already transformed, not just physically, but psychologically and socially. Trauma is forming faster than anyone can track. Identities are shifting under pressure. Lines on maps no longer reflect the lived reality of millions. What remains constant is uncertainty and the shared human instinct to survive, even as the ground beneath that survival keeps changing. 1 week in, the war has already done what wars do best. It has crossed boundaries, between nations, between minds, between who people were and who they are becoming. And the world is only beginning to understand the cost. This is Alex Mercer. And 1 week into this war, one of the most unsettling shifts is not something you can see burning or broken. It's something far more abstract. The economy still exists on paper. Money still has numbers. Accounts still show balances. But the meaning behind all of it has changed so completely that it barely feels real anymore. The systems people trusted for decades, banks, markets, currencies, now feel fragile, distant, almost imaginary when placed next to the raw urgency of survival. People still check their accounts, but the numbers no longer bring comfort. Prices fluctuate wildly, sometimes changing within hours. What cost one amount yesterday costs something entirely different today. Banks restrict access temporarily, though no one knows what temporary means anymore. Limits are imposed. Transfers are delayed. Trust erodes quietly. People begin to understand that money only works when everyone believes in it, and belief is one of the first casualties of war. This is Alex Mercer, and what replaces traditional economics is something older and more human. Essentials take priority over symbols. Food, water, medicine, warmth, these things matter more than any balance on a screen. People begin trading favors, information, and trust. Relationships gain new value. A neighbor with supplies becomes more important than a distant institution. The concept of wealth shifts from accumulation to access, from ownership to availability. In many places, work continues, but it feels disconnected from reality. People log in, show up, follow routines, not because the system feels stable, but because routine itself offers psychological shelter. Others are forced out of work entirely, watching careers built over decades pause or vanish overnight. Plans that once revolved around savings, investments, and long-term goals dissolve into immediate calculations. What do we need today? What can we afford to lose? What can't we replace? This is Alex Mercer, and the emotional impact of this economic shift runs deep. People who once felt secure now feel exposed. Those who relied on structure now see how quickly structure can fracture. The idea that effort guarantees stability is quietly dismantled. The war teaches a harsh lesson. Systems are human-made, and humans are vulnerable. 1 week in, the illusion of permanence is gone, and as material certainty fades, another kind of reckoning rises to the surface, one that no currency can resolve. Faith, doubt, meaning. In moments like this, people look for answers beyond strategy and survival. They ask questions that don't appear in headlines. Why did this happen? What does it say about us? Is there a purpose in enduring this? Or is endurance itself the only meaning left? This is Alex Mercer, and across the world, responses differ deeply. Some turn toward faith with renewed intensity. Prayer becomes routine. Spiritual practices resurface or strengthen. In uncertainty, belief offers structure when the world no longer does. It provides language for fear, hope for endurance, and comfort in the idea that suffering is seen or shared by something greater. Others experience the opposite. Beliefs once held with confidence begin to crack under pressure. Questions arise that feel dangerous to ask, but impossible to ignore. Why would this be allowed to happen? Where was meaning when everything fell apart? Doubt doesn't always arrive loudly. It seeps in quietly, during long nights, in moments of loss, in unanswered prayers. For some, the war doesn't just destroy trust in governments or systems. It challenges faith itself. This is Alex Mercer, and many people exist somewhere between belief and doubt, drifting through both without fully settling into either. They search for meaning in smaller things, in protecting family, in helping others, in simply surviving another day. Meaning becomes less about grand purpose and more about presence, about choosing to care, even when caring hurts. Conversations change. People speak openly about mortality, fate, and fear in ways they never did before. Questions once considered philosophical now feel urgent and personal. What matters if tomorrow is uncertain? What kind of person do I want to be in this world? What do I owe others when everything feels fragile? These questions don't have clear answers, but asking them becomes unavoidable. This is Alex Mercer, and 1 week into the war, belief itself is being reshaped. Not erased, not unified, but transformed. Some beliefs harden, others soften, some disappear entirely. The war reaches beyond borders and economies. It reaches into the core of human identity. It forces people to confront what they rely on when everything else becomes unstable. And perhaps that is one of the most profound truths of this moment. When money stops feeling real, when systems fail, when the future collapses into the present, people are left with what cannot be traded or frozen or devalued. Connection, conviction, meaning, however fragile or uncertain it may be. This is Alex Mercer, and as the world moves deeper into this conflict, it is not only fighting for territory or power, it is struggling to preserve belief, belief in stability, belief in purpose, belief in something worth holding on to when everything else feels temporary. 1 week in, that struggle has already begun, quietly, inside millions of minds and hearts around the world. This is Alex Mercer, and 1 week into this war, there is a quiet truth many adults are struggling to face. Children are no longer fully protected by innocence. Even when no words are spoken, even when screens are turned away and voices are lowered, children feel the change. They sense it in the atmosphere of their homes, in the tension that lingers in silence, in the way routines fracture and familiar comforts disappear. Innocence does not vanish all at once. It erodes slowly, subtly, through environment rather than explanation. Children notice more than adults realize. They notice when conversations stop abruptly as they enter a room. They notice when adults stare at phones for too long, when voices sound strained even during ordinary sentences. They notice when sleep schedules change, when lights stay off longer, when outings are canceled without clear reasons. Even without understanding the details of war, they understand that something is wrong. The world feels heavier, and they carry that weight without the language to describe it. This is Alex Mercer, and what makes this moment so painful is that many adults are doing everything they can to shield the young from fear. They smile more. They speak softly. They offer reassurance they themselves are not sure they believe. But fear does not require explanation to be felt. It moves through tone, posture, and presence. Children read emotional environments instinctively. When adults are anxious, children absorb it, not as information, but as emotion. Questions begin to change. Simple curiosities give way to deeper uncertainty. Why are we staying inside? Why does everyone seem tired? Why can't we visit anymore? These questions are not asked out of panic, but out of confusion. And each answer feels incomplete, because the truth itself feels too large to explain. Adults struggle to balance honesty with protection, knowing that too much truth can overwhelm, but too little leaves children sensing something hidden. This is Alex Mercer, and 1 week in, The routines that once anchored childhood begin to slip. Schools close or change. Play becomes quieter. Laughter still exists, but it feels different, shorter, more fragile. Even moments of joy carry an undercurrent of uncertainty. Children adapt quickly, as humans do, but adaptation in this context comes at a cost. It reshapes what feels normal. It teaches caution earlier than it should. Nighttime becomes especially telling. Bedtime stretches longer. Sleep comes harder. Some children wake without knowing why, unsettled by dreams they cannot explain. Others grow unusually quiet, internalizing emotions they don't yet understand. This is not trauma in the dramatic sense. It is something quieter and more pervasive. It is the slow loss of emotional safety, the sense that the world is predictable and secure. This is Alex Mercer, and even children far from danger are affected. Fear travels through stories, through overheard conversations, through the emotional states of caregivers. Distance does not guarantee protection. The war exists in the background of daily life, shaping moods and reactions. Children learn quickly when adults are worried, even if no one says why. They feel the shift from carefree to cautious, from spontaneous to controlled. What's most heartbreaking is that this erosion of innocence is not caused by understanding violence. It's caused by sensing instability. Children don't need to know details to feel unsafe. They only need to feel that the adults they rely on are unsure. That uncertainty seeps into their worldview, subtly changing how they see the future, how they interpret silence, how they respond to change. This is Alex Mercer, and yet, within this fragile moment, there is also resilience. Children continue to ask questions. They continue to seek comfort. They continue to play, even if play looks different now. Their capacity to adapt is remarkable, but it should not be mistaken for immunity. What they experience during this first week will shape how they remember safety, trust, and stability long after the war fades from headlines. 1 week into the conflict, innocence has not disappeared, but it has been altered. The world has introduced itself earlier than it should have, not through explanation, but through feeling, through tension, through silence, through change. And while adults carry the responsibility of protecting the young as best they can, the truth remains. Children are already aware that something has shifted. This is Alex Mercer, and perhaps the greatest responsibility of this moment is not to pretend everything is fine, but to remain present, to offer consistency where possible, to provide reassurance through action, not just words, because even as innocence erodes, connection still matters. Safety can still be felt in small ways, and in a world growing heavier by the day, those small anchors may matter more than anything else. 1 week in, the war has reached into childhood, not with explanations or images, but with atmosphere. And the echoes of that change will last far longer than anyone wants to imagine. This is Alex Mercer, and 1 week into this war, something remarkable and quietly terrifying has begun to unfold on the global stage. Leaders who once spoke constantly, who filled airwaves and headlines with urgent updates, declarations, and reassurances, are now speaking less. Their words have been measured, restrained, and increasingly rare. Where once there was confidence, there is now caution. Where once there were long speeches meant to inspire or comfort, now every syllable is weighed for its impact. Because leaders know that false reassurance can be more dangerous than silence. Daily statements, once routine, have become exceptions. And when leaders do speak, their words carry a weight that was absent in the early days of conflict. Every phrase is parsed, analyzed, and debated across social media, news outlets, and private conversations. The public listens closely, not for entertainment, not for slogans, not even for hope, but for honesty. People want to know the truth, even if the truth is harsh, even if it carries the promise of uncertainty, loss, or danger. And leaders, aware of this, tread carefully, balancing transparency against the risk of panic. This is Alex Mercer, and one of the subtle changes over this week is how the tone of speeches has shifted. Early broadcasts carried urgency, yes, but also optimism. Confidence was projected, even when behind the curtain, fear and doubt surely existed. Citizens drew strength from that projection. But now words are concise. Promises are rarer. Hints of fatigue, realism, and careful calculation permeate every sentence. Confidence has given way to a sober acknowledgement of difficulty. Leaders no longer promise that all will be well. They promise only that they will continue to act, and that the population must prepare itself for challenges ahead. The psychological impact on the public is profound. People are listening differently. Where once they might have sought reassurance in declarations, now they are searching for clues. What is being emphasized? What is omitted? What words hint at the severity of the situation? Every speech, every broadcast, every press conference is analyzed for subtle shifts in language. The absence of detail is as telling as the inclusion of it. Civilians scan for honesty, for authenticity, for signs that their leaders truly understand the unfolding crisis. In a world turned upside down by war, language itself becomes a form of survival. This is Alex Mercer, and the restraint in communication mirrors the exhaustion in governance. Leaders are human. They tire. They confront impossible decisions behind closed doors. Every announcement must balance the need to maintain order, to avoid panic, and to provide guidance in a world that is increasingly unstable. 1 week into conflict, the process of governance is no longer about inspiring confidence. It is about managing fear. Every word must be chosen to preserve calm without lying, to convey reality without creating despair. It is a balancing act that stretches credibility and patience on both sides of the podium. For the public, this creates a strange mixture of relief and dread. Relief that someone is still speaking at all, that instructions, guidance, or updates are still being delivered. Dread because the brevity and careful tone suggest the situation is far more serious than headlines alone can convey. Every pause, every hesitation, every word missing carries meaning. Citizens begin to listen not only to content, but to cadence, inflection, and delivery. Subtext becomes critical. People learn quickly which phrases indicate urgency, which indicate containment, and which hint at the worst-case scenarios they already fear. This is Alex Mercer, and in homes, offices, and shelters around the world, this shift in leadership communication has created its own kind of tension. People no longer relax after a statement. They do not leave screens on as a form of reassurance. Instead, they dwell on each word, replay it in their minds, and consider what was not said. Suspicion and awareness coexist with trust, an uneasy duality born of necessity. The emotional labor of interpreting these messages adds to the cumulative stress of life during wartime. Even international communications reflect this change. Allies coordinate in quieter ways. Public announcements become synchronized and minimal, and press conferences carry more weight precisely because they are less frequent. Every statement is now a calculated act, designed to stabilize public perception while reflecting the complex reality behind the scenes. Diplomacy continues, but it is hidden behind carefully chosen words that leave room for interpretation. The world watches, parses, and reacts to nuance, and leaders are painfully aware of that scrutiny. This is Alex Mercer, and the one-week mark shows just how much the public has adjusted its expectations. People no longer anticipate grand speeches or passionate declarations of confidence. They do not expect certainty, because certainty no longer exists. Instead, they seek honesty, clarity, and actionable guidance. They crave a sense that someone, anyone, is fully aware of the situation and capable of navigating it, even when that navigation is difficult or incomplete. The change in communication patterns also mirrors a broader psychological shift. Where once optimism could mask fear, now realism dominates perception. Citizens accept that uncertainty is the new baseline. Leaders are no longer storytellers. They are messengers, conveying information that must be absorbed carefully. And this shift affects behavior. Preparation increases. Personal planning becomes more urgent, and emotional responses are filtered through the lens of survival rather than expectation. This is Alex Mercer, and as we move further into this conflict, one truth becomes unavoidable. Words carry immense power during war, but their scarcity, tone, and precision carry even more. 1 week in, leaders speak less, and when they do, every word hurts. Not in the sense of cruelty, but in the sense of consequence. Every phrase must be interpreted carefully, every pause analyzed, and every omission understood. Civilians have learned to listen between the lines, because the lines themselves are no longer enough to convey the reality of the world they inhabit. 1 week into this war, the era of confident speeches and bold statements has ended. It has been replaced by measured words, subtle cues, and a public that is listening harder than ever. The world has learned that in times like these, honesty is more valuable than comfort, and restraint carries more meaning than volume. Leaders no longer speak to reassure. They speak to inform, to warn, and to maintain the delicate thread of stability in a reality that grows more uncertain with each passing day. This is Alex Mercer, and 1 week into this war, there is a question that hangs in the air, unspoken but omnipresent. It creeps into the consciousness of millions around the world, surfacing in long pauses, in silent glances, in messages left unanswered. It is a question people do not voice aloud, because to say it feels like giving it power. What if this never truly ends? 1 week into World War III, the shock and adrenaline of the first days have faded, leaving a deeper, heavier realization behind. This is not a temporary disruption. This is a fundamental reshaping of existence. People carry this thought in subtle ways. It infiltrates routines. Every small decision, the choice to eat, to sleep, to leave a safe space, carries the weight of a world that may never feel familiar again. Families plan not for months or years, but for the next few hours. Communities attempt to preserve some sense of structure, but even the most careful preparations are fragile against the uncertainty looming over every action. Survival is no longer simply about endurance. It has become about adaptation, about redefining what life can be when the foundation beneath it has been shaken so completely. This is Alex Mercer, and the psychological shift is profound. Fear no longer exists only in response to immediate danger. It has evolved into a background state, quiet but persistent, shaping thought and behavior in ways people are only beginning to notice. People notice their own vigilance, their hesitation, their inability to relax even in moments of apparent safety. They notice the way conversations shrink, the way laughter is tempered, the way joy feels conditional. The thought that this may last indefinitely looms over every interaction, unspoken but felt. Even infrastructure and institutions cannot provide the reassurance once expected. Governments issue statements carefully measured, but the subtext is clear. No one truly knows what the future will hold. Markets react violently. Supply chains falter. Borders strain under waves of movement. Education, work, and community functions all exist under the shadow of uncertainty. Humanity begins to sense that the world it knew, the predictable, the structured, the safe, may not return in any recognizable form. This is Alex Mercer, and on a personal level, the question manifests in private moments. A parent wonders if the routines that comforted children will be enough. A worker hesitates to commit to plans that extend beyond the immediate. Friends communicate cautiously, aware that attachments now carry risk and responsibility. Even those removed from the front lines feel the same unease. The abstract possibility of permanent disruption becomes concrete in thought, in emotion, in bodily tension. 1 week in, people begin to redefine priorities. Survival is no longer just physical. It is emotional, psychological, social. What does life mean if permanence cannot be assumed? How does one measure success, happiness, or hope when the rules of the world are shifting daily? Ordinary decisions, eating, sleeping, traveling, carry a weight they never did before. Humanity collectively feels the fragility of its own constructs, from currency to culture to community. Life is no longer about accumulation or progression. It is about continuity, presence, and endurance in the broadest sense. This is Alex Mercer, and even silence now holds meaning. The absence of sirens, explosions, or announcements does not signal peace. It signals waiting, reflection, contemplation. People are learning to live with uncertainty, to exist in the space between action and inaction, between fear and hope, between survival and life. This liminal space is uncomfortable, exhausting, but also strangely formative. It shapes the way societies function, the way families connect, and the way individuals understand themselves in a world turned upside down. And perhaps most poignantly, 1 week into World War III, humanity is beginning to realize that endurance alone is insufficient. Survival is necessary, but it is no longer sufficient to sustain the human spirit. Life must be redefined. Traditions, routines, relationships, all of them must be adapted to a reality that may never resemble the past. 1 week in, the question lingers in every home, every city, every mind. What does it mean to live when the world itself has fundamentally changed? This is Alex Mercer, reminding you that even unspoken questions carry weight, and that the journey ahead will require more than resilience. It will demand imagination, adaptation, and the courage to envision a life rebuilt in a landscape forever altered. The first week is over, but the reflection has only begun. This is Alex Mercer, and as we close this broadcast, take a moment to breathe. 1 week into a world transformed, the fear, uncertainty, and quiet weight of survival remain, but so does something more resilient: humanity. We may not know what tomorrow brings, but each day lived, each choice made, and each connection preserved reminds us that even in darkness, we endure. Hold on to that. Stay vigilant, stay aware, and above all, stay connected to yourself, to your loved ones, and to the world that continues to turn, even in the most uncertain times. From all of us here on the airwaves, thank you for listening. This is Alex Mercer, signing off. Until the next time, stay safe, stay strong, and remember, even amidst chaos, every heartbeat is a victory.